Feathers and Ash, Part 3. The Ancient One Rises.
Feathers and ash, two worlds collide, where steam meets sky and truth can't hide if the
Kai ran back to the harbor, the feathered suit gleaming with oil, his muscles burning with desperate effort. He found Thomas still waiting at the pier, the old fisherman's eyes widening as he took in the sight of the boy transformed.
Sweet feathers and ash. You look like something out of the old stories, half bird, half man.
He studied the intricate pattern of oiled feathers that covered Kai from neck to toe.
That's your grandfather's diving suit, isn't it? Haven't seen one of those in 50 years or so.
Will you take me back?
Kai asked urgently, already stepping into the boat.
Aye, lad. If that time-tested suit can do what the modern brass cannot.
Thomas took up the oars with renewed purpose, pulling hard toward the Prometheus.
Your grandfather was the finest deep-water fisherman these islands ever knew. If his suit's half as good as the man who wore it, you might just have a chance.
As they rowed toward the chaos surrounding the Prometheus, Kai felt the ancient suit come alive. The feathers began to shift and adjust like living scales, each layer responding to the moisture in the air. As they reached the thermal zone, channels and air pockets formed throughout the suit, preparing his body for crushing depths like the adaptations of deep-sea creatures. The suit was preparing him for an environment no human body was meant to endure. His breathing grew more efficient as the suit's built-in air circulation system activated. Hollow bird bones sewn into the chest piece distributed oxygen more effectively, while specialized valves, crafted from modified beaks, regulated pressure. The transformation was not just physical, it felt physiological, as if his grandfather's knowledge had been woven into every thread. An inferno of steam and sound had engulfed the Prometheus. Scalding water erupted around the vessel as steam whistles shrieked warnings. The diving crew frantically worked the air pump.
His speaking tube's been damaged. We've lost voice contact.
Jenkins shouted over the noise of escaping steam.
Air supply is still flowing, but we can't hear him.
Kai didn't hesitate. He dove from Thomas's rowboat into the superheated water. The feathered suit worked perfectly, the natural oils repelling the scalding liquid, the layered feathers insulating him from the extreme temperatures. But more than that, he could feel the suit adapting to the crushing pressure as he descended, its air-filled chambers compressing and expanding in rhythm with the water pressure around him. His body seemed to become more flexible, more resilient, as if the suit was teaching him to move like the deep-sea creatures that thrived in these impossible conditions. Down he swam, following the brass air hose into the depths. Steam bubbles rose around him like a curtain of pearls. His chest rose and fell in a rhythm that wasn't quite his own, deeper, slower, as if something else was setting the pace. But the ancient leather bindings around his ribs creaked and stretched with each breath, oiled seams beginning to weep moisture. The air tasted of salt and wind, yet each inhalation required more effort as the suit's age showed. His ribs expanded further than they should, but the feathered chest piece grew heavier with each stroke. Still, he pushed deeper. Through the murky, superheated water, an otherworldly sight emerged. Translucent creatures like jellyfish made of living steam poured from the volcanic vent in ghostly streams. They moved with eerie intelligence, their tentacle-like appendages reaching toward anything mechanical, wrapping around pipes and gauges with what seemed like malevolent purpose. There, through this nightmare of thermal wraiths, he saw his father's brass helmet gleaming. Marcus was fighting his way toward the volcanic vent, the explosive charges clutched in his hands while the vent wraiths swarmed around him. Every time he tried to position the devices, the creatures would surge forward, their translucent bodies pulsing with scalding heat.
Get away from him.
The silent shout tore through him as he fought against the water's resistance. His father was losing the battle. The vent wraiths grew thicker around the vent opening, as if protecting their volcanic birthplace. Marcus raised his arms, trying to force his way through their ethereal mass to reach the critical placement point for the charges. The volcanic vent erupted with movement, and from its deepest, most hellish depths rose a further nightmare, a colossal steam phantom easily 3 times the size of the others, its translucent bell pulsing with volcanic fire. Primordial and terrible, it moved with the authority of an ancient one defending its brood. Tentacles as thick as ship's ropes lashed out, wrapping around Marcus's diving equipment and trying to drag him away from the explosive charges.
Not today, you bastard. I've got a job to finish.
Marcus fought back with the desperate strength of a man who knew entire communities depended on him. He grabbed his diving knife and slashed at the creature's appendages, but the blade passed harmlessly through its ethereal form.
What in hell's name are you things?
He muttered, backing away as more tentacles reached for him. The Ancient One's bell contracted, and a pulse of superheated water slammed into Marcus, sending him tumbling through the thermal currents.
Ash. Water's hot enough to boil a man alive.
He gasped, feeling the heat penetrate his equipment seals. The smaller thermal wraiths swarmed around their leader, forming a living wall between Marcus and the vent. Every time he tried to approach, they surged forward in coordinated waves, their tentacles interweaving to create an impenetrable barrier of scalding steam and ghostly flesh.
You want to protect this vent? Well, I'm here to cap it, and nothing, not you, not your whole bloody family, is going to stop me.
Marcus's training took over. He pulled a flare from his equipment belt and triggered it underwater. The magnesium burn created a brilliant white light that seemed to pain the thermal creatures, causing them to recoil momentarily.
Don't like that, do you? Let's see how you handle this.
In that instant, he lunged forward, explosive charges clutched against his chest. The Ancient One was cunning. It circled behind Marcus while he fought the smaller creatures, and then struck from below with massive tentacles that wrapped around his air hose and diving lines.
Clever devil?
Marcus admitted grimly as the primordial creature began to pull, trying to drag the human down into the volcanic depths where no mechanical device could function. Marcus grabbed onto the iron framework of the monitoring station, his brass gloves screeching against the twisted metal as he fought against the creature's immense strength.
I've been working these waters 20 years. You think some overgrown jellyfish is going to finish me?
The Ancient One's bell pulsed again, and Marcus screamed into his helmet as superheated water found the gaps in his equipment seals.
Bloody hell. That's hot enough to strip paint.
Still he held on. Still he fought.
My family, my island. I won't let you destroy everything I've spent my life protecting.
Kai acted on instinct. The feathered suit had completed its supernatural transformation. He was no longer entirely human, but something adapted for this impossible environment. Spreading his arms wide, he swept them forward in a powerful stroke. The suit channeled forces beyond mere physics, and a pressure wave rippled outward like the shock from a great wing beat, scattering the thermal creatures in all directions. The Ancient One was caught in the blast as well. The massive creature reeled backward, its translucent form rippling from the impact. Stunned and weakened, it retreated toward the primary thermal vent, seeking to restore its power by feeding directly from the volcanic source. But the force of Kai's wing beat had been too strong, too unfocused. The feathered shockwave struck his father as well, and Kai watched in horror as the explosive charges tumbled from Marcus's hands, spinning away into the volcanic depths.
No.
Marcus roared silently into his dead helmet, the severed speaking tube trailing uselessly as his carefully placed thermal capping charges tumbled into the abyss. 4 weeks of preparation, mercury-triggered explosives rated for crushing depths, all spinning away into the volcanic darkness. The Ancient One, stunned by Kai's wing beat, writhed in the thermal currents below, its massive translucent bell pulsing weakly as it fought to recover from the pressure blast. Its trailing tentacles drifted limply in the superheated water, still completely ethereal. Through his brass faceplate, Marcus caught his son's eye and pointed desperately downward at the tumbling charges. Kai nodded, understanding instantly. They both dove after their only hope. Marcus pushed his diving suit beyond safe limits, brass joints screaming protests as he forced himself through thermal layers that made his gauges spin wildly. The first charge tumbled past a twisted beam of the monitoring station. He lunged, brass gloves closing around the precision mechanism just as a massive tentacle swept through the space his head had occupied.
Got one.
He muttered to himself, knowing no one could hear. Kai moved through the superheated water like something born to it, the feathered suit channeling the thermal currents around his body. The second charge spun deeper, toward where smaller steam-wraiths lurked in the volcanic shadows. As Kai reached for it, one of the creatures materialized directly in his path, its translucent flesh pulsing with hunger. But the remaining 2 charges tumbled beyond their reach, disappearing into the deeper thermal chaos where the volcanic currents made pursuit impossible. Lost in the abyss. Marcus held up 2 fingers to Kai, then gestured to his equipment belt where he'd secured the recovered charges. The boy nodded grimly, 2 charges left. It would have to be enough. Behind Marcus, the seafloor was changing. What had seemed like scattered volcanic vents suddenly pulsed in unison. The Ancient One, retreating from Kai's devastating wing beat, sought desperately to restore its power by feeding directly from the thermal sources. As it pressed its massive bell against the primary vent opening, something far more terrifying began. The creature's translucent bell flattened and elongated, developing rigid cartilaginous ridges like a massive ray. Fins sprouted from its sides, angel fish wings that beat the water with supernatural power. Its trailing tentacles multiplied, thickened, became more solid with each pulse of volcanic energy it absorbed. Steam-wraiths materialized by the hundreds, but now they didn't swarm randomly. The Ancient One's body flashed with bioluminescent patterns, complex signals that organized its minions into distinct tactical units. A third of the steam-wraiths pressed their translucent bodies together, creating a shimmering wall that rippled with shared heat. Marcus activated his thermal lance, the superheated blade hissing as it met the first layer of interlocked creatures.
Come on, you bastards. Let's see what you're made of.
He muttered into his silent helmet. The lance pierced through one wraith, its ethereal flesh parting like hot wax around the metal. Steam erupted from the wound, but instead of dissolving, the creature held position, its damaged form still blocking Marcus's path. He thrust deeper, the blade cutting through a second wraith, then a third.
What the hell? Stay down.
Each strike released clouds of scalding vapor. The wounded steam-wraiths trembled but maintained their grip on each other, their translucent bodies now shot through with dark cracks where the lance had carved through them. Behind the damaged wall, fresh wraiths flowed forward, weaving themselves into the gaps. Marcus pulled back, his brass glove blistered from contact with the superheated steam. The wall reformed instantly, unmarked except for the faint scars where his blade had passed. He gestured to Kai. "Can't break through." The boy pointed toward a thin spot in the formation, but as Marcus moved toward it, the entire wall flowed like mercury, thickening exactly where he intended to strike. A sharp crack echoed through the water. Marcus spun to see a cluster of bloated steam-wraiths 50 feet away, their bellies grotesquely distended like pregnant toads. They convulsed in unison, vomiting volleys of volcanic rock with devastating accuracy. One projectile struck Marcus's thermal lance, shattering the steam chamber. Another cracked his pressure gauge. These weren't random attacks. The spitters were targeting his equipment with surgical precision.
My equipment. A lifetime of engineering, and you're picking it apart piece by piece.
He muttered, watching his meticulously crafted tools fail one by one. Kai dove left as a barrage of stones whistled past him. The feathered suit's flexibility saved him, but the projectiles were getting closer, more accurate. The bloated creatures were learning his movement patterns. Beyond the damaged wall, Marcus watched something that made his stomach turn. Larger steam-wraiths with distended bellies undulated between the fallen fragments of their kin. Where his thermal lance had carved through the interlocked defenders, pieces of ethereal flesh drifted in the current like ghostly snow. The scavengers descended on these remains with obscene hunger. Their mouths, barely visible slits in their translucent forms, stretched impossibly wide. They engulfed the fragments, their bodies pulsing as they absorbed the dissolved tissue of their own kind. Marcus watched one scavenger swell to twice its original size after consuming the remnants of 3 defenders. Its form grew more solid, more defined. Dark veins appeared beneath its translucent skin as the cannibalized essence spread through its body like ink in water. The bloated creature then pressed against a wounded spitter, transferring its stolen mass through direct contact. The injured wraith's cracked form sealed itself, its damaged sections regenerating with the absorbed flesh of its devoured comrades. Within moments, what should have been permanent casualties were restored to full strength. The artillery resumed firing. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was truly lost.
Impossible. Every creature I kill just makes them stronger.
With each pulse of thermal energy, the Ancient One continued its transformation. Shark-like dorsal fins erupted along its spine. Its bell had become a streamlined head with rows of crystalline teeth. Massive tentacles, now solid as ship's cables, writhed from where its mantle had been. It was becoming corporeal, real, deadly. The heat from the thermal vents was hardening its ethereal form into living volcanic glass and muscle. The Ancient One's bioluminescent signals flashed in a complex pattern. All 3 unit types moved in perfect coordination. Barriers formed corridors, channeling Marcus toward the spitter's kill zones. Scavengers positioned themselves to harvest any wraiths he might destroy, ensuring no losses were truly permanent. Marcus found himself driven deeper toward the superheated thermal vents where his brass suit would cook him alive. His pressure gauges spun wildly as he descended past safe operating depths.
70 feet, 80. This depth will crush me before the heat kills me. Got to find another way.
Kai tried to reach his father, but a squadron of spitters had bracketed him with precisely aimed stone barrages. The boy was forced to weave and dodge, the feathered suit's flexibility, his only defense against the increasingly accurate fire. The creature's transformed head turned toward the primary thermal vent. Its crystalline teeth began to glow, drawing energy directly from the volcanic core. As it fed, its entire body expanded further. New tentacles sprouted. Its fins grew wider, more powerful. But the most terrifying change was its eyes. Where the bell creature had possessed simple light sensors, the evolved Ancient One now had compound eyes like a monstrous angelfish, hundreds of lenses that tracked both Marcus and Kai simultaneously. It flashed another complex signal. The barrier units began sacrificing themselves en masse, dissolving into raw energy that the scavengers absorbed and channeled directly to their master. The Ancient One doubled in size, its body now solid enough to cause pressure waves with each movement. A coordinated strike hit Marcus's air reserve chamber. The brass cracked. Precious air bubbled out in silver stream.
No, not the air supply.
Marcus gasped, watching his life support fail. He gestured frantically to Kai, pointing toward the surface. Get out while you still can. Marcus's thermal lance sputtered and died as scalding water flooded its heating chamber. His emergency ballast weights had been severed by precise wraith attacks. He was trapped at crushing depth with no way to ascend, though his airline from the Prometheus still functioned.
Everything's failing. 20 years. Engineering these systems. And they're picking them apart like a child's toy. Think, Marcus, think.
His thermal lance was destroyed. His pressure suit was failing at these depths. But in his equipment belt, he still carried one of the recovered mercury-triggered explosive charges, a brass housing containing dynamite, designed to seal thermal vents through controlled collapse.
One charge left. Against all of this.
He sighed. He caught Kai's eye and held up the charge. The boy understood immediately, not the thermal vents, but the creature itself. But reaching the Ancient One meant swimming through 3 coordinated defensive systems, each one deadlier than anything they'd faced above. Marcus pointed toward the surface, shook his head violently at his son. Too dangerous. Kai was already studying the enemy formations, looking for patterns, weaknesses. The spitters reloaded in cycles. The barriers shifted positions every 30 seconds. The scavengers moved predictably toward casualties. There was a pattern, a rhythm, and Kai had learned to read the water's rhythms from birth.
Unbelievable. You're a maverick, kid.
Kai folded his arms tight, then exploded forward in a corkscrew. His feathered suit shot him through a gap between 2 barrier formations, a split second ahead of the spitters reloading. He swept past the first bloated creature, a blur that tore open its distended belly. Volcanic rot billowed into the superheated water. The second spitter convulsed, its bells contracting as it tried to locate him through the water's vibrations, but Kai was already spiraling upward, using their confusion to vault higher. Marcus began his slow descent through the thermal chaos, his brass suit forcing him to move with deliberate, measured strokes. Through the superheated water he glimpsed something that made his heart leap, the 2 lost charges, lodged in a crevice of the deeper thermal chamber where spawn were emerging. The brass housings glinted in the volcanic glow, their mercury switches intact but building pressure in the crushing depths.
The charges we lost. If I can get this monster down there.
Marcus's grip tightened on his remaining charge. His eyes flicked between the Ancient One's approaching tentacles and the charges below. Instead of trying to evade the creature's grasp, he angled his heavy descent, letting gravity and the Ancient One's own momentum pull them both toward the deeper chamber. Kai launched himself toward the Ancient One's compound eyes. Every wraith unit responded instantly, barriers forming walls to block his path, spitters swiveling to track his movement, scavengers positioning for harvest.
Come on then, you hellish slime. Let's see how deep you want to follow me.
The creature's massive tentacles reached for Marcus. His brass suit made him an easy target, slow, predictable, but he used this to his advantage, letting the Ancient One's grip drag his heavy form exactly where he needed to be, directly above the waiting explosives. This has been Feathers and Ash, written by Philip Gray, digital narration by Chatterbox TTS, title song When Birds Fall Silent by Rose and Eden, lyrics co-written by Philip Gray and Suno, Music composed and produced using Suno. Published by Pleased Reader. An imprint of Oslage. Copyright 2025 by Philip Gray. Production copyright 2025 by Oslage. All rights reserved.